Do you know your mother is poisoning you?
Eleanor Sinclair was dying slowly, and no one seemed to notice or care. At 26 years old, she had developed a mysterious illness that left her constantly weak, frequently ill, and increasingly unable to manage even the simplest daily tasks. Her complexion had taken on a grayish pallor. Her hair, once lustrous and dark, had become thin and brittle. Her joints ached constantly, and her mind, once sharp and engaged with the world, had become foggy and unreliable. The doctors in Denver had run every test they could conceive of. They had examined her blood, analyzed her waste, consulted medical journals from across the country. Their conclusion was always the same. Eleanor Sinclair suffered from consumption, a wasting disease of the lungs that would gradually steal her life from her, probably within another year or two. Her mother, Margaret Sinclair, was attentive to her care in a way that seemed almost obsessive. She brought Eleanor her meals personally, insisting on feeding her when Eleanor became too weak to lift a fork. She prepared special tonics and medicinal teas, sitting beside Eleanor's bed and ensuring she drank every drop. She brought flowers to Eleanor's room and spoke softly about the importance of accepting God's will. But Eleanor, in the rare moments when her mind was clear and her body felt slightly less weighted with poison, began to notice something odd. Her symptoms always worsened after her mother's visits. Her nausea intensified after the tonics. Her pain seemed to peak after the medicinal teas. And there was something in her mother's eyes, something cold and calculating, that didn't match the gentle words her mother spoke. Eleanor's older sister, Catherine, had married and moved to Wyoming 2 years earlier. They corresponded regularly, and Eleanor found herself beginning to write to Catherine about her suspicions, though she hardly dared believe them. "I think Mother's intentionally making me sick," Eleanor wrote in a letter that she later burned, afraid someone would find it. "I know how this sounds. She's my mother. She should love me. But there's something in the way she watches me suffer, something almost satisfied. Am I going mad? Or am I discovering something terrible?" Eleanor never sent the letter. Instead, she fell deeper into illness, her mind growing hazier, her body weaker. She began to lose track of days and weeks. The world became a strange, dreamlike place where nothing felt quite real. The mountain man who would change everything arrived in Denver in the spring of 1892, though Eleanor didn't know he would become the instrument of her salvation. His name was Jacob Mercer, and he was in the city on business related to fur trading and land speculation. He was a solitary figure, more comfortable in wilderness than civilization, and he spent most of his time avoiding the social niceties that plagued Denver society. It was pure chance that brought him to Eleanor's situation at all. Jacob's sister, Margaret Blackwell, lived in Denver and moved in social circles that occasionally intersected with the Sinclair family. Margaret had known Eleanor before her illness, had found her to be an intelligent, vibrant young woman with capacity for genuine kindness. When Margaret encountered Eleanor at a church gathering, months into her illness, she was shocked by the transformation. "Eleanor looks like a ghost," Margaret told her brother that evening. "She's wasting away. The doctors say it's consumption, but something about it feels wrong to me. I've seen consumption before. This feels different." "What feels different?" Jacob asked, though his tone suggested skepticism. He had little patience for society's gossip. "The way her mother hovers over her," Margaret said, "it's almost predatory. And Eleanor seems afraid of her, though she tries to hide it. I'm probably being ridiculous, but would you consider looking into it? You have a way of seeing through things that others miss." Jacob was skeptical, but he trusted his sister's instincts. He began making subtle inquiries, speaking casually with servants who worked in the Sinclair household, observing Margaret Sinclair's interactions with her daughter during the few times he encountered them. What he discovered alarmed him. The Sinclair family was not as united as it appeared. Eleanor's father had died 5 years earlier, leaving his considerable estate to be divided among his wife and 3 children. Eleanor's 2 brothers had received land and business interests. Catherine had received a sum of money and property that would have been hers upon marriage. But Eleanor, the youngest, the most vulnerable, the one most likely to be easily manipulated, had been left with the bulk of her father's personal wealth, jewelry, cash, and liquid assets worth nearly $50,000. If Eleanor died without heirs, that wealth would pass to her mother. Jacob began researching Margaret Sinclair's financial situation. What he found was damning. Margaret was deeply in debt. Her investments had failed. Her attempts to maintain social standing had drained her resources. She was, in short, desperate for money. Jacob obtained samples of the tea and tonics that Margaret was giving Eleanor. He paid a chemist to analyze them, swearing him to absolute secrecy. The results were unmistakable. The substances contained arsenic, a slow poison that, administered in small doses over time, would produce the exact symptoms Eleanor was experiencing. Eleanor was being murdered by her own mother, slowly and methodically, through the very care that was supposed to be helping her. Jacob took his findings to the local sheriff, but the man was reluctant to act. Margaret Sinclair was a respectable widow, a woman of some standing in society. The accusation would require substantial proof, and more importantly, it would require someone to be willing to publicly accuse her. "I'll stand as a witness," Jacob said coldly. "I have the chemist's analysis. I have evidence of her financial desperation. And I have a young woman who is being slowly poisoned by her own mother. If you won't act on this, I'll take it to the federal authorities." The threat of federal involvement was enough to motivate the sheriff. An investigation was launched, conducted quietly to avoid scandal. Eleanor's room was searched. More evidence of arsenic was found. Margaret Sinclair's financial records were examined. But before authorities could formally arrest her, Margaret attempted to administer a large dose of arsenic to Eleanor, intending to accelerate the process and make it appear as a sudden onset of her consumption. Jacob, who had been watching the house from a distance, saw Margaret entering Eleanor's room and followed her inside. What he witnessed would stay with him forever. A woman standing over her daughter with a cup of poison liquid, whispers of, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry," delivered with a tone of voice that suggested she was asking Eleanor's forgiveness for the murder she was about to commit. Jacob pulled the cup away and confronted Margaret directly. She collapsed into a chair, all pretense of maternal care abandoned, and confessed everything in a voice devoid of emotion or remorse. "She would have had everything," Margaret said, not meeting his eyes. "She would have had a beautiful life, while I was left with nothing. It wasn't fair. It was never fair. She didn't deserve to have so much when I had sacrificed so much to raise her." Eleanor was immediately removed from her mother's care and placed under the medical supervision of doctors who specialized in arsenic poisoning. Her recovery was slow and painful. Her body had to slowly eliminate the poison that had accumulated in her tissues, and the process involved severe illness and almost unbearable pain. But gradually, over months, Eleanor began to heal. Margaret Sinclair was arrested, tried, and convicted of attempted murder. The trial scandalized Denver society, but it also created a shift in how people viewed maternal authority. No longer could mother be blindly trusted simply because of the biological relationship. Eleanor's public testimony about her slow poisoning became a watershed moment in discussions about women's vulnerability within families. During Eleanor's recovery, Jacob visited her regularly. He brought her books, sat with her through her painful detoxification, and never once treated her as a victim or an object of pity. He treated her as a person worth protecting, a woman of value whose life was precious. "Why did you help me?" Eleanor asked him one day, as she sat up in bed for the first time with genuine strength in her body. "Because you were being murdered," Jacob replied simply, "and because no one else was willing to see what was happening." "But you're not even from Denver," Eleanor continued. "You barely know me. You could have ignored it. Ignored all of it." Jacob was quiet for a moment. "My mother died when I was young," he said finally, "under circumstances that I've always wondered about. My father was a harsh man, and my mother had a way of defying him that angered him. When she died suddenly, he claimed it was natural causes. But I've always wondered if he hastened her death somehow. I've always regretted that I was too young, too powerless, to protect her. When I saw what was happening to you, I couldn't ignore it. I couldn't let another woman be destroyed by someone who was supposed to love her." Eleanor recovered fully over the course of a year. Her strength returned. Her mind cleared, and as she moved through her recovery, She developed feelings for the mountain man who had saved her life. Not because he had rescued her, but because he had seen the truth when others were content with comforting lies. When Eleanor was finally strong enough to consider her future, Jacob made an unexpected proposal. "I'm not a civilized man," he told her as they sat on the porch of her house, watching the sunset. "I live in the mountains, far from society and its complications. But I know that I want you in my life, not out of obligation, not out of the impulse to rescue, but because you are remarkable, because your survival in the face of someone trying to destroy you proves your strength, and because I've fallen in love with the woman you are, independent of any need to be saved." He paused, and Eleanor saw genuine vulnerability in his weathered face. "Eleanor, will you marry me? Will you come to mountains with me and build a life where you'll never have to fear the people who are supposed to love you, where you'll be valued and protected and treated as the extraordinary woman you are?" Eleanor said yes. She married Jacob in a quiet ceremony attended by her sister Catherine and Jacob's sister Margaret. She left Denver society behind and built a new life in the mountains, a life of genuine safety, genuine love, and genuine worth. Eleanor became known throughout the territory as a woman of remarkable strength and wisdom. She worked alongside Jacob managing his trading operations, and she became an advocate for other women in dangerous family situations. She helped establish a home for women fleeing domestic violence, using her story to demonstrate that abuse within families was real, that it could be recognized and stopped, and that survival was possible. Years later, when people asked Eleanor about the moment she realized her mother was poisoning her, she would speak of the terrible clarity that came from recognizing danger from the person who was supposed to protect you. But she would always emphasize what came after that horror: Jacob's belief in her, his willingness to investigate, his refusal to let her die in silence. "Being poisoned by your mother teaches you something terrible," Eleanor would say. "It teaches you that love can be a weapon, that trust can be weaponized, that the people closest to you can wish you harm. But being rescued by someone who saw the truth when others denied it, that teaches you something equally important. It teaches you that there are people in this world who will stand between you and danger, who will believe you when others call you paranoid, who will act even when action is costly and difficult. Those people are rarer than the dangerous ones, but they exist, and their faith in you can save your life." And Eleanor lived out her days in the mountains, surrounded by the beauty of nature and the genuine love of a man who had seen truth where others saw only comfortable lies, and had been willing to risk everything to expose that truth and protect the woman at its center.